Get out the insurance cards, get out the copays. The office is open, my friends. Brought to you by drroto.com.
What is up, and welcome into another very special off-season edition. We are the One and Done Show. We are your fast break of college basketball information. I am your host, Eric Romoff. You can catch me on those Twitter streets at FantasyNav, and he is the captain of our ship. He is the arbiter of our big board. If it's Saturday night, he is the crew chief of our team. He is MC Holland34 on Twitter. Mike Holland. Mike, how's it going today?
It is going well. It is scorching hot, so I'm glad to be inside doing this show. I'm also glad that the offseason's slowing down. I think we only have 5 players left on our transfer big board on drroto.com that are left to decide. So just kind of excited to talk, more about some other things that are going on during this offseason here. Right now I'm working on a piece, on impact players that are returning back to their respective teams. Guys that withdrew from the NBA draft and, what kind of impact they're going to have on their conferences and on their teams. So looking forward to putting that out. Also looking at some NBA draft content, covering the guys that we played a lot in DFS this past year. So, yeah, just a lot going on. Also threw on some American East Conference tape this week. So just trying to sharpen up some of these mid-majors, as we work through the long off season. But also starting on roster previews. So that's always a fun thing to do. But I think that, you may have some news that could make one of our viewers have their week even better. So why don't you tell us about that?
Yeah, love that you're still grinding away at tape. I am absolutely pumped for the start of next season because I'm assuming that we will have probably a 6-week window where we are just miles ahead of the field. But the thing that I am most excited about is that we actually have a giveaway going on for today's show. So for those of you that are joining us here on YouTube, if you haven't already, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. And then we've got a pinned question in the chat. I'll pull it up here on the stream, which is who will be the X factor for your team this season? Once you've hit that subscribe button, answer that question, and you will be entered to win. We're giving away a signed piece of Duke memorabilia. We're giving away a signed piece of UNC memorabilia. So if you follow those steps, you will be entered to win, and one lucky winner from each team will be taking home a new piece for their collection. So definitely make sure that you're not missing out on that.
Yeah, and I guess we had to talk about the 2 teams that we're going to be talking about today. Absolutely excited for today's guest. He covers 2 of the biggest, if not the 2 biggest college basketball programs in the country for The Athletic in the rivals North Carolina and Duke. So let's welcome Brendan Marks to the One and Done Show to talk some ACC hoops. Brendan, how are you doing today?
Hey, guys, I'm doing great. I appreciate you having me. This giveaway is awesome. Love that.
Yeah, we're definitely excited. We're excited to have you on, and I'm going to embarrass you a little bit. I'm going to wish you a belated birthday and wish that everyone else who is watching do the same. Throw some birthday wishes into the chats for Brendan. We were talking a little bit off camera backstage about his birthday celebration this year. It sounds like it was a good one. So again, happy birthday, Brendan, and thank you very much for making some time for us. I wanted to start sort of right off the top. Kind of curious what it's like to cover these 2 programs, these huge prolific programs in college basketball simultaneously, right? How do you manage those relationship dynamics?
Yeah, it's certainly a task. It is not something that's easy whatsoever. The biggest challenge that I have during the course of the season is not being able to just clone myself or split myself in 2. And that really is the toughest part is logistically, just when you have 2 teams that command the gravitas that North Carolina and Duke do, it's hard to figure out where you should be at any given moment. So for me, I think the thing that a lot of people don't recognize that makes my job a lot easier is both of these programs are incredibly similar. When you are a program at the caliber of North Carolina, Duke, Kentucky, Kansas, when you're in that ballpark, to some extent, while things are different, they're also same in terms of the fundamentals and the foundation of the program. So for me, getting to see how both of those 2 programs have sort of built themselves over time differently, but similarly. And now you can sort of see, I think it's, fascinating for me. They're both sort of at this crux where they're, going into new eras and starting off fresh. So it's been fun for me. I love doing it. I think I have the best job in the world. So I certainly can't complain.
Nice. Yeah, definitely nice. Even keel, maybe playing both sides of the fence answer. To follow up, I'm gonna pin you down. So For those who haven't experienced Cameron Indoor and the Dean Center, can you maybe tell them a bit about what it's like for that in-game atmosphere? And curious to know from you, do you prefer one setting over the other?
Yeah, I have absolutely no qualms about saying that I prefer watching games in Cameron Indoor. I think it's one of the coolest venues in sports. Especially for us as writers, we're right there we're on the court. We're right there and we're interacting with the fans. They're pushing up against our backs. You learn really quickly that the day of the Duke UNC game in Cameron, you don't wear nice clothes because they're going to get spoiled. My dry cleaning bill after that game is always especially exorbitant, but I think they're just different. In Cameron, it is so small, it's so quaint, and you can really feel the whole building shake whenever something exciting happens. In the Smith Center, it's different. It's the enormity of it. It's the fact that there are 20,000+ people or however many, and they're all, honed in on this one game. So whenever there is that thunderous dunk or that breakaway moment, that's when you hear just the overwhelming noise that comes from the crowd. So you don't necessarily get that in Cameron, but I just think the smaller atmosphere plays so well to college basketball. I mean, I love going to games at both, but if I have to pick between the two, I'm picking Cameron almost every day.
I am absolutely jealous at that response. That is so awesome, man. Just watching it on TV, it's absolutely electric, especially when they play each other. But just wanted to start out here, and let's start with North Carolina. Obviously, the big news is that they're returning their core of players that played for it all last year. You've got Armando Bacot, Caleb Love, RJ Davis, Leaky Black, all returning. It looks like they're going to start the year either number 1, number 2 in the rankings. So, from your perspective here, what's this group need to do to kind of recapture that magic of last year's incredible run?
Yeah, well, I think the word magic there is doing a lot of work. And it's really sort of the perfect word because for most of the year, this was sort of a middling team. This was not a team that was really challenging for the top of the ACC. It wasn't ranked the entirety of the season. And then come the middle of February, everything just started to click. And so I think that for UNC this year, and especially for Hubert Davis, who now has a year of experience under his belt, he's not a rookie head coach anymore. At this point, it's about making sure that the things that you were doing the back half of the year that worked so well can become core tenets of your program. So, rather than riding this, magical momentum or whatever North Carolina captured during the postseason last year, you're talking about doing those things consistently. This is a team that can't afford to be getting blown out by 20, 25 points in the middle of the season like it was last year, time and time again. So it really was sort of a magical run. I think that if you had told North Carolina fans at the beginning of February they were going to play for the national title, they would have thought that you were absolutely insane. So I think it's about making sure that some of the things that enabled them to go on that run late become more consistent, and you see those from the start of the season.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. And for me, it really illustrates the fact that this was a significant transition, right? Coach Hubert Davis obviously had a very impressive first year, but it is not like he, came screaming out of the gates, right? It took a little while to get his sea legs. So I'm curious to know from you, what role, if any, did the coach that he was replacing, Roy Williams, play in that transition? And how do you think Davis will handle the pressure that comes with him having so much early success?
Yeah, it's sort of funny to think about it, but I almost feel like by getting to the national title last year, Hubert Davis took some pressure off himself. And that might sound a little bit reverse to hear, but when you were talking about him coming into last season, you're replacing a legend. You have no body of work. You've never been a coach before. You are talking about maybe integrating some new form of offense, but nobody really knows what it's going to be or what it's going to look like or if it's going to be successful. So I think going into last year, there was this huge sentiment of, okay, North Carolina is one of the core vets of college basketball, and we just gave the keys to somebody who's never driven a car before. Now you're talking about somebody who has proven that it works. And so I think that obviously there's going to be pressure to get back to that point, especially with the core they have returning. But at the same time, Hubert has proven that to some extent, I've got proof of concept already. My offense works when I'm able to actually coach basketball, which was, I think, the biggest change you saw between the start of last season and the middle of February. He stopped having to worry about energy, stopped having to worry about his rotation, roles sort of naturally aligned and settled. And then it just got to the point where he was coaching. He's running different offensive sets. He's running out of bounds things that he wasn't able to do at the beginning of the year. So the pressure is obviously still going to be there. I just think it's a little bit different than what it would have been going into last year when there was really no basic comparison.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely agree with that. You wanted to talk about last year's run. So it looked like that sometimes the depth was an issue. It looked like, really the keys that Davis handed to were to a core group of guys, and there wasn't much depth. And you look at like that Baylor game. We actually picked North Carolina to beat Baylor when we did our one and done bracket. So, obviously sweated that one out right towards the end. It looked like with the Manic ejection and Love being in foul trouble, it was just limping towards the end here. So just want to get your thoughts here. Not this program's going to get, 3 guys here from the high school ranks ranked 18th on 24/7 composite. How is this 3-man class, going to fare here? And is there an X factor in this group?
Yeah. So, to start out, you're totally spot on about last year and the lack of depth. For the guys who played the entirety of the game against Duke at Cameron and Coach K's final home game, they sort of got dubbed the Iron Five for how many minutes they were playing. And, some North Carolina fans have even joked about hanging a banner for the Iron Five for, knocking Coach K off 2 different times last season. But yeah, I think when you're talking about this incoming 3-man class, it's a question of how immediately ready are these guys going to be to contribute. Seth Trimble comes in. He's their top ranked recruit, 4-star point guard. He's a guy who's playing with USA basketball right now. And I really think that he can be an X factor right off the jump. He's a guy who slots in nicely as their third guard in the backcourt. He's someone who at the high school level was comfortable playing on and off ball. So I think that makes him sort of a nice match beside either Caleb Love or RJ Davis when those guys are getting spells. The thing that I think makes him somebody who can step in immediately is the fact that he's already 6'3". He's a grown man. He's got a big body. He's already been filling out his frame. And defensively, he's not a liability right off the jump. So as somebody who can handle the ball, somebody who's not going to get exposed on the other end of the floor, I think he'll be able to contribute right away. But the X factor to me is Jalen Washington. He is sort of the backup big that North Carolina is going to have this year. And the reason he's the X factor to me is he healthy? This is a guy who's had a number of knee injuries in his career. When he committed to Hubert Davis last summer, he was a 5-star recruit and then missed his entire senior year with recovering from a knee injury. So if he's healthy for the start of the season, which was something that was absolutely not a guarantee, even as recently as 2 months ago, just talking to coaches and people with the program, if he's able to go from the jump, then that immediately changes the depth of this program, because Armando Bacot's really the only true big that this team has. So if Jalen Washington can come in and play in some backup 5 minutes, play at the 4 a little bit, it's going to give Hubert Davis, I think, a lot more leeway to sort of integrate these guys than he would if Jalen's not able to go.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about that Baylor game in the tournament, and that is a shining example of when having some depth at the 5 would be important. So definitely like that Washington call. Next up, I do want to sort of zoom out a little bit and talk about this new college basketball landscape where NIL and the transfer portal are major, if not the most significant factors into how these teams fluctuate over the course of any given season. So we saw how important Manic was for this Tar Heels team coming over last year from Oklahoma. We want to hear about some of the opportunities for Bacot in the NIL market. And then on the Duke side, I mean, they've brought in some really high-profile recruits with NIL evaluation. So I wanted to get your thoughts on how these two programs are navigating these waters and where they maybe differ in their approach to NIL and the transfer portal.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that we can start with North Carolina. They are the staff there, Hubert Davis and all of his assistants. They are taking Brady Manick's film. They are taking Brady Manick's Instagram, his social media, all of his posts talking about how much he loves North Carolina, his cameos, merch line, whatever. They're taking all of that. They're putting it on a zip drive as a file, and they're sending it out to every transfer that they contact in the portal. They're sending it out and saying, look what we can offer as a transfer destination. And really, that's something that is so invaluable, because as I think a lot of college programs are sorting through what sort of transfer program do we want to be, what sort of NIL program do we want to be. For North Carolina, Brady Manick's immediate success last year, not just in terms of being able to integrate, but last year was statistically the best season of Brady Manick's career, obviously from a team perspective and getting to the title, but individually, his 3-point percentages were at an all-time high, points scored, minutes. I mean, all of that. He was tremendous. So I think that North Carolina is pitching itself as a place that, listen, you can come, you can have an immediate impact, and at the same time, we are still going to get you better. Even if you're coming in just as a one-year player, we're somebody who's going to be able to take you and transform your game. So that's something that I think North Carolina can offer that probably not a lot of schools in the country can. Kentucky had some similar success. Obviously, you look at what happened with Oscar Tshiebwe and Kellen Grady and some of those guys, but those two are sort of pacing the pack in that regard. You look at Duke on the other hand, and some of the transfers they've brought in are more specific role fits. So Theo John last year comes in, plays a key role as a backup big, but it's not to the same caliber of impact that someone like a Manic had. I will say in terms of the NIL market, sort of shifting away from the transfer portal a little bit, both of these schools are still trying to figure out what they want to look like in that regard. Just this week, Duke hired Rachel Baker. She's a longtime Nike and NBA executive. She's somebody who's done a lot of strategy for them. They hire her as general manager, and she's somebody who's coming in, and her role primarily is to help Duke figure out, A, what is our NIL policy going to be? B, how can we make it even better? And C, for our players who are coming in, be it high school, be it transfer portal guys, what can we do to take them from where they are currently and take them to the next level? At North Carolina right now, NIL, I would say, is probably a little more individualized. We talk about Armando Bacot and some of the deals that he's had. He's, dipping his brand into everything that he possibly can. He's acting even, he's going to be in Outer Banks. He's somebody who is capitalizing on his own personality. Obviously, he's probably going to be a preseason All-American, preseason ACC Player of the Year candidate. He's parlaying all of that into individual deals, but it's less so from an institutional perspective and more just from him and his personal brand. So that's probably the biggest difference right now, is leveraging Duke versus leveraging just being an individual when those two schools are talking about their NIL policy.
Yeah, covering this NIL is absolutely crazy, right? Just if we could get a little more parameters around this thing, maybe we can figure out where we want to go from here. But, wanted to kind of touch on something that you just mentioned here, the general manager position. You wrote an amazing piece at The Athletic about the historical hire of Rachel Baker as the GM for Duke men's basketball. For those who haven't read it yet, what's the vision of this role, and why is she uniquely qualified to really succeed in this?
Yeah, absolutely. So essentially, John Shire, Duke's first-year head coach, is creating a new position with the Duke staff. So it's going to be a general manager position. It's something that had not previously existed. And frankly, from what I've been told about other programs around the country, Duke is going to be first. They're not going to be the only ones by far. This is something that's going to be coming to most high major programs in the immediate future. And essentially what the job is it is taking the responsibilities of some of what we were just talking about in terms of NIL and transfer portal off of the head coach's plate. Obviously, in this era, you're talking about a guy in John Shire, sort of like Hubert Davis last year, who not only is stepping into a tremendous vacancy, but at the same time, he's trying to navigate NIL, transfer portal, all the different ways college athletics are changing, maybe the conference realignment, all those sorts of things are swirling right now. And the job that Rachel Baker, who's being brought in to be general manager, her job is essentially to just take some of those responsibilities away from John Shire. So obviously, name, image, and likeness is at the top of that list. She's not going to be somebody who's reaching out on behalf of the athletes to different companies and operating under the Duke umbrella. That's against Duke policy. But she's somebody who players can come to, can work through their deals with, can talk about how does X opportunity align with my personal brand. If I already have a deal with X business, how does Y business fit into that same picture? Are these things comparing? Are these things complementing? So I think it's just trying to help answer some of those questions. Like I said, at both of these schools, NIL has kind of been a little bit individualized so far. And I think this is a step towards Duke trying to make it something that they can not only have at a foundational instructional level, but it's something that when they're talking to recruits in the future, they can say, listen, this is sort of our process. This is our formula. This is how you would fit into it in the same way. And, I can just tell you from having spoken to parents and talking to coaches that every single recruit that both of these programs are talking to is asking about NIL during the recruiting process. So having that answer and having somebody they can turn to ask specific questions is really huge.
Yeah, I love, the historic nature of this hire, both for the role itself and for the person that is filling it. And it's really interesting to watch, Duke continue to innovate and lead in this area. We talked a little bit about it with regard to Coach Davis, but now staying on this Duke tip, John Shire has arguably bigger shoes to fill in his first year as a head coach. So want to know from your point of view, what would you categorize as his biggest challenges in this first year? And have you seen anything thus far that either gives you cause for concern or cause for confidence as he tries to come in and fill the very large shoes of Coach K?
Yeah, it's just taking over for the winningest coach in college basketball. No big deal, right?
No big deal.
Just your average everyday promotion. I think the biggest thing for John this first year is just going to be, how does he make the program his own? Because I think, you're totally right. When you're talking about Hubert Davis taking over at North Carolina, he is obviously stepping into huge shoes too, but it's shoes that have changed hands a little bit. You've had Dean Smith, you've had Bill Guthridge, you've had Matt Doherty, you've had Roy Williams. So there have been different cooks in that kitchen. At Duke, Coach K is synonymous with Duke basketball. I mean, he completely transformed the brand and the capabilities of that university. So I think for John, it was all about, how am I going to make this my own? And I think the confidence that I have in that is, you've already started to see some of the steps he's taken. He is somebody who has been willing to go into the transfer portal, where maybe historically Duke was not as keen to do that. He's somebody who, in the scheme of roster management, has to deal with early entrance to the NBA draft and trying to suss out, okay, how do I support my guys while also making sure I have a fallback plan? He's come up with creative solutions in that, right? He's hiring new people. You just look at his staff. He's a guy who's gone and gone a little bit outside of the box. Historically, under Coach K, Duke was hiring only Duke players. He goes and he steals Jay Lucas away from Kentucky, one of the best up-and-coming assistants in the country. That's a huge move. So I think for John, there's obviously going to be a lot for him to prove. He's not going to be able to, erase himself or prove himself in just 1 year. But what he's done already is he's proven that he's not afraid to change things up a little bit. And I think that when you're coming into a role as massive as this, that can be something that's a little overwhelming. So I've been impressed at how adventurous he's been willing to be with some of his hires, some of his decisions, and just the way he's gone about managing his roster in general.
Yeah, I absolutely love the hire of Lucas, and man, just having followed his career here in Austin, just watching him climb through the ranks, it's been pretty awesome. I wanted to get your thoughts on the Duke roster now. Once again, it's going to be a heavy batch of incoming freshmen, ranked number 1 in the country. Can you break down what guys like Derek Lively, Tariq Whitehead, Kyle Filipowski, now you got the reclassified Tyrese Proctor, what they're going to bring to this team and needing to backfill a lot of these guys that are, dare I say, one and done?
Yeah, I mean, it's a whole new unit, just roll in the next battalion. That's basically what Duke does. And so I think this freshman class is great. There's a ton of individual talent, whether you're talking about Whitehead or Lively or Flip or any of them. My biggest concern, or the thing I'm most interested in, is how does it all fit together? I think in Derek Lively and Kyle Filipowski, you have two guys who are both incredibly talented bigs, sort of different body types, different game styles. My comparison, just from the little bit that I've gotten to see from Derek Lively, I think that he can have sort of a Willie Cauley-Stein impact at Duke this year. He's going to be a rim runner. He's going to be a shot blocker. He's going to fill a lot of that interior offensive and defensive roles that Mark Williams filled last year. He's also a guy who I think is comfortable stepping out and, hitting a three on occasion when it's available, which is not something that we saw from Mark Williams in the past. So Lively, I think, he's so athletic. He's so long. That's what I sort of expect from him. Next to him, Kyle Filipowski, you've got a guy who's just incredibly skilled, so polished offensively. He's someone who has, especially for his size, incredible ball handling skills, guard-like almost perimeter skills. He's someone who can take you off the dribble. He's somebody who can shoot over you. I don't know that he offers the same defensive upside that Lively does, but that's why you, in theory, are going to play the two of them together, which is sort of what I expect to do. And you'll have a little bit of both of them. And obviously when they're in there by themselves at the 5, I think they'll both be able to hang. The guy I'm probably most excited about is Tariq Whitehead. We got to see him last week in person at K Academy. John Shire and Coach K both met with reporters, and he is much bigger in person than I expected him to be. I think he's listed at 6'6" or so, but if you told me that he was 6'7", 6'8", his frame almost looks like it's at an AJ Griffin level, just in terms of the bulk and the size and how built he is. I was incredibly surprised at that, because when you talk about his ability off the dribble, you talk about slashing to the rim, being able to shoot. He, I think, is the guy who is probably most poised to become the quote-unquote star of this team. He's someone who's going to have to fill a lot of that perimeter shot-making role. He's going to have to shoot. And then in terms of Tyrese Proctor, he's a fascinating project. Is he a guy who, Duke has had a history with reclassifications with guards. Some have worked out better than others. I think Proctor probably is a guy who comes in and he's going to play a little bit of combo. I think he's going to play some off ball alongside Jeremy Roach. I think there's also going to be times when Roach is out and they just put the keys in his hands. Great shooter, great vision. Defensively, is he a liability? Is he somebody who can get a lot better on that end? He's got the frame for it. He's longer in the wingspan. So again, like you're talking about tremendous projection for these guys. Well, anytime you're integrating so many different one and done pieces, it's fascinating to see how they fit. We didn't even mention, Jaden Schutt and Mark Mitchell. Those guys are going to play huge roles too. It's just interesting to me to see how all of those pieces are going to fit together. Do they fit together? I'm not so sure that it's going to be seamless, but there's a reason I don't get paid millions of dollars to coach basketball, and Jon Scheyer does. So I'll leave that up to him.
Yeah, definitely am going to borrow the concept of a new battalion coming in. Obviously, a lot of turnover in the ranks here for this Duke program, but one player who is returning is Jeremy Roach. And at least for our money, one of, if not the most effective in-tournament adjustments that we saw last year was Coach K inserting him into the starting lineup, giving more of a traditional kind of guard look, lead guard look. So wanted to hear from you is how important was it for Coach Jon Scheyer to get him back into the fold this year? And are there any other returning players that you think will step up to fill this void?
Yeah, well, he's basically the only returning player, so I hope he's going to be an impactful one. But, I totally agree with you. I thought that what Coach K and Jon Scheyer, to be honest with you, did with Jeremy Roach during the NCAA tournament last year was incredible. And I think not just for the fact that you saw what it did in terms of the tournament and getting Duke to the Final Four. I think what Jeremy Roach did during the tournament last year was one of the big reasons that he ended up coming back. This is a guy who throughout the course of the season sort of saw his role change. When Trevor Keels was out with an injury in the middle of the year, he steps in and, is posting this insane assist to turnover ratio. Then Keels comes back, his role changes again. Like you were sort of wondering, like, what is Jeremy Roach, and this is a guy who had some injuries in high school. You're wondering, is he still being held back by that? But what you saw at the end of the season and even going into the postseason, before that, was somebody who can be the true lead guard for this team. And I think that you look historically at some of the best Duke teams, they have had that seasoned tenured guard. Duke didn't necessarily have that for most of the year last year, and at times struggled with turnovers, struggled with getting into the offensive sets that they wanted. So getting Jeremy back was not at all certain, and Jon getting him to actually return and be the leader of this team was huge. I think for him, the biggest growth area is going to be how effective can he be offensively when he's not setting up his teammates. He's shown the ability to pass. He's shown the ability to kick out. He's shown the ability to hit that behind the head scoop pass out of a pick and roll. Is he a guy who can shoot 35% from three? Can he get up to 38% from three? If he's able to do that as a floor spacer, especially considering how many shooters Duke lost in Trevor Keels and Wendell Moore, and even to a lesser extent, Paolo Banchero, AJ Griffin, he's going to have to do that for Duke to be its best version of himself. If he's hovering around 30, 31% like he's been the last 2 years, I don't know how effective Duke is going to be. And teams are going to sag off him. So unless he's able to hit those shots, life is going to be a lot harder for him. But Jeremy Roach is the guy who's going to determine how far Duke goes this year. If he plays out of his mind, then Duke has Final Four potential again. And if not, if he struggles, then I think you can see the rest of the roster follow suit.
Yeah, his outside shooting is going to be key, right? I know Duke's looking at Jacob Grandison. I believe he was visiting recently. So trying to get some more of that outside shooting that they lost. I really loved AJ Griffin's game. So looking forward to seeing him in the pros. But just wanted to kind of take a step back, look at the ACC as a whole. We watched Miami last year, took a really nice step forward. They've been pretty successful in this offseason. For me, my money, North Carolina State looks like they're building an intriguing roster. And then you have Notre Dame, who's returning a bunch of key players, older players that won 15 games in conference play. So the question for you is, is there a team that you think can challenge these programs, or do you think these two teams rise to the top again?
Yeah, I think, we talk about all the pieces that North Carolina has back. I think they're the clear ACC front runner just in terms of experience, production, and also, continuing to have young guys step in. Brady Manick leaves, Puff Johnson and Dontrez Styles both have opportunity for bigger roles. I think that's really exciting. So, but in terms of other teams that are intriguing that I think could make a run in the ACC, I'm not ever going to count out Tony Bennett in Virginia. They're a team that's got a ton of returning production. Kihei Clark's back, Jaden Gardner's back. They bring in, an interesting recruiting group too via the portal and high school. Notre Dame, you talk about all the returners they have. Blake Wesley's gone, but JJ Starling comes in. He's maybe even more of an offensive dynamo than Blake Wesley was. Obviously, Miami has got NIL money and they're spending it. So I think that the ACC got such a bad rap last year because of its non-conference slate. And North Carolina had a lot of the reason to do with that, just got embarrassed time and time again, whether it was Tennessee, whether it was Purdue, whether it was Kentucky. And then you saw over the course of the conference schedule, like, hey, Miami's actually a pretty good team. Like, North Carolina's figuring things out. So I think it's going to be a more balanced. It'll be a meatier midsection, definitely in the ACC. I think it'll be more balanced. I would still have North Carolina atop there, but then in the sort of the rankings after that, Duke, obviously, Notre Dame, Virginia, Miami. I think that's probably your upper echelon. But no more ACC slander. I will not tolerate any more ACC slander this year. The ACC proved in the tournament that it's a better league than people gave it credit for.
We love the ACC on this show, so you're always welcome here. So, before we let you go, we're still 150 days out from the regular season here. Do you like either of these teams to take the ACC next year? Which one do you like to take it? And where do you see them starting in the rankings to start the year?
Yeah, I think that for North Carolina, like you guys had mentioned earlier in the year, you're spot on. I mean, they're going to be a top 3 at worst preseason team. Just again, you're talking about basically running it back, everybody from last year's championship roster. That doesn't mean this is going to be the same team immediately. Replacing Brady Manick is a huge hole that has to be filled, whether that ends up being via the transfer portal or it's just Puff Johnson and Dontrez Styles having more of a role. But I still think that North Carolina is the pace to clear in the ACC. They have everything to prove. They've already shown what they're capable of when they're gunning at their top regard. After those guys, I find it difficult to see that anybody else should start out in the preseason at a higher ranking than them. Duke is going to be up there, but you're talking about so many new pieces. And again, we're talking about losing the outside shooting of Brady Manick. Duke's got to do the same thing. And we saw during the NCAA tournament last year, some of Duke's shooting inefficiencies were the reason that they ended up not making it past North Carolina in the Final Four. So that's a huge question mark that I think John Shire still has to fill. And, he's coached 3 games at Duke. So he's got obviously a lot of runway still to figure that out. But I would say North Carolina's just the front runner overall. Too much combination of experience, incoming talent. Hubert Davis has proven that his system works. And I think you look at the rest of the league, it's kind of in an area of flux. Leonard Hamilton has been sort of a new blood, one and done. I love Leonard Hamilton. He's a tremendous coach. Is Florida State going to have the same injury woes they had last year? They're going to get back to the point that they were at. Again, Virginia had a little bit of a down year, obviously struggled at the beginning of the year, and then Tony Bennett figured things out. It's a fascinating time in the ACC. Is Mike Bray on the outs? He's been getting a little long in the tooth. I love Mike Bray, but Notre Dame probably needs to start planning for contingency after him. It's a fascinating time of transition. So I'll go North Carolina at the front, but I'm fascinated to see what happens in the ACC this year. It definitely will be a better and more competitive year than it was in conference play last year.
Yeah, we will continue to wave the flag for the ACC here on the One and Done show. Brendan Marks, thank you so much for making some time and spending it here with us today, getting us up to speed on these 2 prolific programs. For those of you that are not following Brendan already, his Twitter is scrolling along the bottom of the screen right now, Brendan R. Marks on Twitter. You can check out all of his fantastic work over at The Athletic. Very well written, very well researched, and a really interesting perspective, right? This isn't Duke Homer feeding red meat to the base. It's a really interesting objective and balanced point of view that you provide by covering both teams. So again, thank you for spending some time with us and getting us up to speed on these 2 programs in the offseason thus far. For those of you that are still with us, it is not too late to get into our giveaway. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and respond to the prompt pinned at the top of the chat. Who is the X factor for your team this season? We're going to continue to let that soak through Saturday. So you still have time to rewatch this, to think about it, and make sure you give the answer that you are happy to lock in as your final answer. And that will get you entered and help you get this bread.
Thanks for stopping by the office. Get your fantasy prescription by subscribing to the channel and checking out drroto.com. And until the next visit, be well and take care.